Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you're a professional navigating today's complex corporate environments, you already know the stakes for delivering successful projects have literally never been higher. Today, we aren't just talking about crossing off tasks on some endless Gantt chart. We're talking about fundamentally shifting our approach. It's about moving from rigid management to dynamic project leadership and redefining how you drive massive value for your organization. So let's dive into how you can shift your mindset from merely managing the process to truly leading the outcome.
Right out of the gate, we have to talk about this number, 99.5%. According to the Harvard Business Review, a staggering 99.5% of all large projects either miss their time targets, blow past their budgets, or just completely fail to deliver the benefits that stakeholders actually require. Think about that for a second. If you're leading initiatives in your career right now, you are operating in a system where near total failure is just a statistical norm. It's wild.
But we can fix this. Here's our roadmap to move from managing failure to leading extreme value. First, we'll look at the project failure epidemic. Second, uncovering the root causes. Third, the power of framing. Fourth, redefining strategic risk. And finally, leading the future.
Starting with Section 1, the project failure epidemic.
To really grasp the scale of this crisis, just look at the sheer financial hemorrhage happening in our industries right now. 30% of today's projects are dealing with catastrophic financial blowouts, overrunning their budgets by over 50%. And look, the rate of change in business today is just so high that if we delay decisions or make the wrong ones, we instantly lose competitiveness. We're trying to manage projects in this highly volatile, super complex world, but we're still relying on outdated, rigid control methods. It just doesn't work anymore.
Moving right along to Section 2, uncovering the root causes.
We really need to debunk a massive myth here. When a project tanks, everyone loves to blame technical glitches or software failures, right? But actually, the number one root cause, sitting right at the top at 28%, is people and organization. That means leadership, culture, capability, and communication. Technical challenges come in second at 22%. By contrast, the actual project management processes, those things we spend so much time obsessing over, account for only 8% of failures. If we don't figure out how people work, how culture operates, and how to communicate effectively, we are never going to achieve the results our stakeholders are demanding.
So, what does this mean for your career? Well, it requires a complete paradigm shift. We have to move away from being just an execution manager, someone solely focused on coordinating activities, controlling performance, and executing rigid plans. Instead, the early stages of any project absolutely demand a development leader, and this is a completely different beast. A development leader focuses on front-end, innovative thinking, absolute clarity of vision, and inspiring a team to navigate complexity before the actual execution even begins. Because the truth is, you generate 100% of your project's value early on in that development stage.
All right, Section 3, the power of framing.
So how do we rescue failing projects? Project leaders have to first answer 6 critical questions to create absolute clarity for their teams. We call these the 6 Ps. First, purpose. Why are we doing this? Second, picture. What is the environment we're operating in? Third, plan. What are the steps to set this up for success? Fourth, part. Who really needs to be involved to remove blind spots? Fifth, performance. What outcomes are stakeholders actually expecting? And finally, progression. How do we know we're ready to move to the next stage?
Think of your project like you're navigating a boat down a river. Without framing, you only see the chaotic, uncertain water immediately around you. It's just a blurry, overly complex world. But framing takes all that uncertainty and turns it into a perfectly clear picture of the entire environment. You see the river, the trees, the upcoming waterfalls. It literally turns complexity into absolute clarity, so your whole team understands the journey ahead.
Now, once you frame the environment, you have to frame the objectives. And this is where so many teams fail because they think on time and on budget are objectives. No, those are just baseline goals. Real objectives are what the stakeholders value. There's a famous pairwise comparison matrix from the US government during the Carter administration that perfectly illustrates how to align stakeholders on really high-stakes objectives. When prioritizing issues during the hostage crisis, comparing objectives directly against each other objectively revealed that prioritizing political life and US prestige actually outweighed the direct military costs. It's a ruthless method, but it is an incredibly effective way to force alignment when multiple stakeholders want completely different things.
Let me share a fantastic corporate anecdote that proves how powerful this is. There was this massive project that was just stuck in the appraisal bin, getting recycled and thrown out every single year for 8
years. I mean, it's a pain a lot of us know too well, right? And it was happening because no one knew what the actual objectives were. But by using this exact objective alignment technique with their 4 joint venture partners, they finally nailed down the top 3 priorities. Number 1, no negative cash flow in any year. Number 2, optionality to extend the life of the field later. And number 3, reduce carbon intensity. With those 3 clear, prioritized objectives, the engineering team finally had the absolute clarity they needed to successfully push the project into the execution phase.
Let's pivot to Section 4, redefining strategic risk.
Forget those boring spreadsheets filled with isolated risks and thousands of unmanageable actions. True leaders redefine risk as a dynamic strategy tool using scenario planning. You have to evaluate 3 distinct scenarios. First, the status quo or base case, which is just your current plan. Second, the disaster case, figuring out what happens if the environment totally turns against you. And crucially, the third is the major shift, or the brave new world. This means identifying new opportunities that could drastically improve the project. As a leader, you have to maintain a chronic unease, constantly questioning that base case.
Usually, traditional risk management is all about playing defense, right? Protecting value against the variance or the disaster case. But to drive real profitability and stand out as a true leader, you have to look to the future, envision a major positive shift, and literally plan backwards. You've got to ask your team, how do we create an upside that puts us 20% or even 50% above our base case?
And getting to that kind of forward thinking requires looking hard at alternatives. Take this incredible corporate story. An offshore project team needed to install a new module. The standard base case approach was to use a highly expensive, heavy lift vessel that was super subject to weather delays. But someone on the team, who was totally empowered by this leadership mindset, imagined a major shift alternative. What if they just used the existing drilling rig's drawworks instead? They ran the risk assessment, proved it was viable, and by swapping the vessel for the rig, they cut the project's benchmark cost from $56 million down to just $26 million. That is the financial power of true project leadership.
Finally, Section 5, leading the future.
To tie this all together, stepping away from the old rigid models that no longer work means you have to master 2 core world-class delivery strategies. First, you must completely master maximizing project value. This means deeply understanding value engineering, managing team entropy, and aggressively negotiating for the outcomes that stakeholders actually care about. Second, you must implement effective governance and risk performance. This isn't about micromanaging at the end, it's about starting with a really clear purpose, setting rigid standards, and capitalizing on the upside to propel your projects right into the top quartile.
Let's zoom out for a second and connect this back to the much bigger picture. Global competition for resources is increasing dramatically. If we continue to fail at a 99.5% rate on large projects, it's not just corporate profits that take a hit. We are literally duty-bound to improve project delivery. Because if we don't, the sustainability and endurability of our economy, our energy, and our environment for the next generation will genuinely be at risk. It matters that much.
So I want to leave you with one final, provocative question to challenge your own career trajectory on Monday morning. On your current projects, are you just managing the process, or are you actually leading the outcome? Embracing true project leadership, focusing on culture, framing, and strategic risk is exactly how you move the needle. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Take these frameworks, apply them to your work, and I'll see you next time.